Hey, you had a good laugh today? I wonder. Join us. See if I can give you a laugh.
It's time for another show from Colin Jones, the Reasonable Adventurer. Time for you to take another step towards creating your own opportunities for satisfaction.
And it is a huge welcome to you all to episode 75 of the Reasonable Adventurer. I tell you what, there's a few attributes of the Reasonable Adventurer that get talked about more than others. You know, this challenging mental models. We've done that across a lot of different episodes. We've talked about value judgments. We've certainly talked a lot about tolerance for ambiguity and sort of challenging yourself and putting yourself into different spaces. But there is one attribute that doesn't seem to get a lot of attention. And it's actually a critical one, because without it, it's hard to actually have those other attributes. Because it's so easy to take ourselves so seriously, you know, in whatever we're doing in life, right? We have a good day, we have a bad day, and that seems to affect our temperament, our way of thinking about things. And it's important, it's really, really important that we make sure that this last attribute, which is number 6, sense of humour, that we keep it in our mind, you know. It's one of those ones, you know, you go off and ask people. From 1 to 10, 1 being not very happy and not able to have a laugh, through to always laughing at things and I'm not so sure you're even serious, it'd be worth taking the time to go and ask people. Because there's something that happens when people know that you're capable of humour. When you can interact with people at that lower level. And I say a lower level, but I really sort of almost mean a higher level. Because in terms of opening doors and lowering assumptions, having that sense of humour is so important. And it's a bit like creativity. The way we organise society doesn't really invite humour. If you're the big boss and you're getting paid the big bucks and you've got the responsibilities, then the last thing people expect is for you to be walking around having a good old laugh at everything. And yet, that's most probably what we need. And it's interesting. And I know from my own personal experiences, sometimes I've found myself laughing at things which are really quite dangerous. I remember I nearly killed someone once. And I'll tell you the quick story. First day on the job as an apprentice diesel fitter, I was working on a crane, and the guy said, you know, you push this lever to lift the boom up. And so, being a crane, when you use the hydraulics, the actual boom would go up very, very slowly. And even when you pushed it down, it would come down very, very slowly. And this was just like the hydraulics that were on my father's tractor. So I assumed, okay, get that, I understand that, that seems to be what I'm used to. A few days later, someone said, can you hop up in the cab and give me a hand with this truck? And they wanted me to drop the tray of the truck down. And they said, yeah, just lower it down slowly. So I just assumed it meant push the lever. Well, push the lever. Down came this tray. Would have cut this guy in half. Would have cut him in half. But for the prop, the safety prop, which just by fluke went back into its hole in the chassis and stopped this thing coming down. He looked up at me. I was laughing, a nervous laugh. You know, I realised what had happened and I just couldn't control myself. I was so nervous. Now, that's very, very different to trying to create an environment where humour is present. And I try to use this to my advantage in teaching environments. And it's not always as successful as you would like it to be, because when you're dealing with different cultures, they may not have been used to, say, humour. Well, 1, not used to humour in an educational setting, and 2, maybe quite unawares of what Australian humour is, and even my type of humour, right? And so this does create challenges, but it's a breakthrough mechanism. When you can have a laugh with somebody, when you can share that laugh, all of a sudden you're almost at the same level. You're not being perceived as having more power or having less power. You're equal because you both found something funny. You both found something, a means of connecting that's not sort of just organised around that challenge of straight down the line communication. So I'm curious, in your own world, how often are you able to have those humorous conversations? How often do you find yourself wanting to have some humour in the conversation but thinking that people won't take you seriously? There's a person I work with who's very senior, and our conversations always occur through humour. And sometimes people say to me, why do you do that? Maybe they won't like that. And I just think, yeah, but that's just the relationship we've always had over the last few years, which always been interactions which are based on humour, right? And we have very different levels of humour, but there's still a connection there across humour, right? And I found this, when you're working on sort of high-level committees, you bring some humour into the room and people look at you to say, this person's not taking this seriously. And that's interesting, isn't it? That people may assume that because you can find something humorous, that you must automatically not be taking something serious. Because if you were taking it serious, you'd be serious, yeah? There wouldn't be anything to have a laugh about. But the reality is, if you're not able to actually allow somebody to have a dig at you, to talk about you, to run an analogy that relates to you, right? Without taking offence, without seeing the potential humour in what someone's saying, then you're locking yourself out of all of those conversations. You're actually making it very difficult for people to want to come and interact with you. And this is one of those great challenges. It's not something that we would learn. It's not like, I actually remember going to a laughing workshop at a conference. So it was an experiential education conference, and the whole point of the conference sessions were that you would actually demonstrate whatever your experiential exercises were. And one of the ladies who'd come to this conference, she ran a series of laughing workshops. Now, they were used to sort of break the ice. They were used to sort of just allow everybody to become levelled, very, very equal. And I remember going along to this workshop and thinking to myself, this sounds interesting, And then she would sort of ask, I said, this laugh is the hyena laugh, and she'd do it, and then we'd have to try and copy it to each other. Then say, this is the kookaburra laugh, and then this one's the, rhinoceros laugh, or, various, 20 different laughs. And we had to go through this process of trying to imitate these laughs to each other. And the whole point was that you were laughing, right? And it was funny, right? Because these laughs got sillier and sillier, and they got harder and harder, and everybody started to loosen up. And before you knew it, the whole room was just full of laughter, right? We were laughing at laughing. And I remember walking away and thinking, wow, that was pretty cool, right? That's a really cool way to sort of just get everyone to just relax and take it easy and not be so wound up. So where are you at with that? How does that play through in your world? Do you find yourself having a laugh? And if you're having a laugh, when do you do it? I was at the United Nations giving a presentation and then on a panel. And at the end of the session, and I've been to several events at the United Nations, and they're very, very organised and very dry and very, very staid, if you can imagine. It's just people who are pretty proud and they've got something to say, and they all want to represent their country, in whatever capacity that they may be there. You do sense when you walk through the corridors in Geneva or Vienna, you do sense this air of importance and this opportunity, And we'd got to the end of the day, and at the beginning of that day, there was this lovely lady there from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and she was dressed in the most colourful of dresses. And I remember when she walked in, I was sitting there and I just looked at her and I said to her, "Wow, that's a pretty cool dress you've got on." And she said, "Yes, my birthday dress." And I'm like, "Wow, happy birthday," you know. And then the day rolled on, no big deal. But we got to the end of the day, and it just so happened that my session was the last session of the day. And I leaned across to the guy who was chairing the session, Tony, and I said to him, "Any chance I could have the last say?" And he's like, "Sure, why not?" So I got up, and so this has been a very, very sensible, organised type of process all the way through. Everyone sort of being very sensible, stayed. And then I got up and I asked everybody to stand up. Everybody looked at me, stood up. I told them that entrepreneurship, which was what we were talking about, was by and large a pretty unpredictable and tricky thing to teach, but it could be learned. I then told them that what amazed me is that every time I'd been to the United Nations events, that it was this type of very, very controlled conversation space. And I invited them to do something a bit different. They were all looking at me and wondering, what is he talking about? So there's about 140 countries represented. They're all sitting in front of the sign that's got their country's name on it. And I said that it had come to my attention that somebody in the room was having a special day. And I wanted them to join in and help her celebrate that day. And I asked her to stand up, and she stood up. And then I asked them to join in, and I started singing the song, Happy Birthday. Well, and there's a lot of African people in the room, and it's amazing. You know what? They were looking for an excuse to start singing and clapping their hands. Absolutely, they loved it, right? They wanted to sing. They put a lot of effort into it. There was a lot of joy in the room. When we went out for dinner that night as a group, the vast majority of us, there was this huge hum that was just resonating, that was echoing from everyone having sung that song. People were talking with an entirely different way to each other. It broke this ice massively. Now, I didn't do it for that reason. I just was a bit annoyed, I think, at just how bored I was talking about entrepreneurship. And I like to be excited when I'm talking about this, and I just felt like everyone was just not getting out of their skin. So, it was just another example to me that, one, just follow your heart, just trust yourself, get that laughter happening. It's contagious. It is contagious. Now, what do we say with reasonable adventurer and that last attribute? We say sense of humour, but not at anyone else's expense. And that is the key to this. Being able to accept when someone says something to you that they're not necessarily saying it in any personal way. They're not trying to take you down. They're not trying to have a go at you. It may just be funny, right? So join in and have a laugh. Have a laugh at yourself, right? And likewise, when you've got that situation happening back the other way, and you can find a way of bringing your own humour into the conversation. And I'm finding it quite interesting because where I'm working now, I've been there for a while now, but I'm still meeting new people all the time. And you have that opportunity to sort of just try and tease it out a little bit and to sort of try and start to slip in. And it's not about telling jokes. It's just the way you talk about things. And it's just the ease in which you can relate to people and have those conversations. So there's a great opportunity for us all to think of how we can lighten up, how we can let people see us as more human and less about the responsibilities we have. Still have the responsibilities. They're still there. They're not going anywhere, right? But now the people that you're trying to interact with, that you're trying to work with, now they see you more as a human. Now they actually understand something about you as a result of your ability to use this humour. So there's a challenge. As a challenge for you to do a little bit of an audit. Go and ask a whole bunch of people who you get on with quite well. They could be in your family, they could be at work, they could be just people you interact with socially, and just say, you know what? And you could do this on SurveyMonkey, and we make it anonymous, right? You could just say, look, from 1 to 10. 1, very, very serious soul. 10, far too crazy for anyone to understand. Something in between sounds like it would be okay. Ask people to give you a score. Email it out to people. Say it's anonymous. I'm just interested in a bit of an idea here. See what people say, right? Ask them some feedback in relation to your ability to have that sort of ease at which people can come and actually talk to you. Because I think I'm naturally in that space. I don't have to try to have a sense of humour. I've just got one. And I am aware of it, and I use it to my advantage whenever I possibly can, all right? Because when people are relaxed and having a laugh, it's much, much easier to then let things flow forward rather than those sort of moments of silence and I'm not sure what I should say next. Maybe they'll think something funny of me. Well, just be funny. Just have some fun. Just let it roll. That's my advice. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with that one to think about. How funny are you? How often do you try to be funny? Are you trying too hard to be funny? What would people say if they had an opportunity to tell you anonymously about how easy or how uptight they think you are? Would they like you to be funnier? Would they like you to be more relaxed? Do you overreact when people are maybe including you and something about you in their humour? Can you laugh at yourself? Yeah? So, laughing at danger. Is it something you're good at? Cheerio.